be here at convention among enthusiastic, dedicated progressives from every corner of Canada.
And it's crucial that we seize these opportunities to reflect on where we've been together, to draw strength from the battles we fought and won, and to learn how we can do even better and move forward with great success in the future. This
convention is also the opportunity for us to renew our ties of solidarity, which have made our movement so strong. We're here today with passion and determination to write the next chapter of our history.
85 years ago in Regina, a convention very much like this one outlined priorities such as universal health care, pensions for seniors, benefits for kids, a minimum wage, farm security, insurance for those who lost their jobs, and a labor code to establish workers' rights. It set the agenda for the future of Canada.
And later on in 1961, just down the road at Lansdowne Park, the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation joined with the members of the Canadian Labour Congress to update and renew these social democratic ideas and form the New Democratic Party of Canada. Many of the ideas that our founders could only dream of now form the core of what Canadians hold dear about this country. In government and out, Canadians do best when the NDP is strong. It was the CCF government in Saskatchewan that overcame great obstacles and brought Medicare to this country. And yes, it was. It was the NDP government in Manitoba that became the first in English Canada to get big money out of politics. C'est l'engagement de Jack
envers le Québec. Jack also committed to Quebec, and it showed progressives that they had another option in Ottawa with socio-democratic values.
And it is the Notley government in Alberta that first announced a 15-hour minimum wage for of course, followed by the Horgan government in BC. Yes. And only the NDP, the New Democrats in Ottawa, is fighting for a federal $15 minimum wage.
New Democrats dream. They are bold. They have drive. This is the legacy of our party, and we're very, very proud of that. This is a legacy that we're moving forward with.
With courage, New Democrats shape the direction of this country for the better. We have consistently shown Canadians a new way forward, a truly progressive way, a way they may not have even imagined was possible. And when Canadians dream of the future, they want to see our impact there as well. The future Canadians want is undeniably progressive. We see it in the rise of powerful new social movements for justice and equality, in Me Too, in Idle No More, in Montreal Noir, and Black Lives Matter. We see this in the strong support for Canadians for a plan to tackle climate change. We see it as we travel a road towards reconciliation and continue to pursue, in a long overdue way, a true nation-to-nation relationship with the Indigenous peoples of this country. Canadians don't want a smaller, more ineffectual government. They want a government that is more effective, more caring, and bolder, one that gets things done.
You know, as a politician in 2018, the only way to get Canadians behind you is to sound like a New Democrat. But sounding like a New Democrat doesn't change things for those who need it most. Now, our Prime Minister plays a progressive on Twitter, but the reality on the ground is very, very different. I saw the pain and anger in the eyes of a child care worker in Metco, Maryland, as she told me how difficult it is to keep 100 desperate Indigenous families on a waiting list for Aboriginals' Kids Head Start program. I heard the sadness in the voice of another child care worker, Shelley, as she described how she can't afford to buy fresh fruit or build a playground for her kids simply because there's no money. It was similar to the disappointment in young Katie's voice as she described the shame she felt at our government's climate change inaction when dramatic storms are inflicting immense destruction. And here's the truth. Canada can't even reach Stephen Harper's weak carbon emissions targets. And even though he voted for it, Justin Trudeau has all but ignored Jack Layton's science-based goals in the Climate Change Accountability Act. And I say shame. Now, fancy words in Paris do not reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. The Conservative, meanwhile, is busy doubling down on opposition to any climate change progress at all. Here's another truth. Funding for the Aboriginal Head Start program has been frozen by both Conservative and Liberal governments since 1997. 97, imagine. In fact, Indigenous kids that live on reserve get thousands of dollars less for their education and welfare than other Canadian children. And despite four court orders, the current Liberal government continues to discriminate against Indigenous kids. And Canadians know which party is authentic in its progressive values. It is always has been the NDP. It is the NDP because when push comes to shove, people know we will always put them first. Not the well-connected, not the tax-evading elites, not corporations who place profit before humanity. We know it is people and their lives that matter most.
We live in truly extraordinarily unfair times. One statistic says it all. 82% of the wealth generated last year went to the top 1%. I repeat, 80% of that growth of all last year went to the top 1%. The 99% got the rest. Billions of dollars are being robbed from families in need of support because well-connected elites in this country are protected by the government from paying their fair share of taxes. Canadians deserve a government that doesn't just use New Democratic sound bites. They deserve a government that acts like New Democrats. Friends, we know doing what is right is rarely easy. We know our party, our movement, our members have always been different. The well-connected elite, the powerful, the super-rich don't share our values. That's the plain truth. Year after year, they have used Liberal and Conservative governments to further their own very private ends. Many years ago, the founding leader of our movement and party, J.S. Woodsworth, said the following: If there must be a fight, then it is a fight for the rights of the many weak against the privileges of few strong. And we stand with the many weak, said J.S. Wordsworth. I hesitate to amend anything that J.S. Wordsworth ever said, but I would say this: when we stand together, we are not the many weak, we are the many strong.
Yeah.
At the core of every New Democrat is an unshakable belief in fairness and the essential right to all Canadians to a life of dignity. We know that your worth isn't measured by how many villas you own, how many powerful friends your family has made over the years, or how many stock options you have to put to your name. Nous savons que
we know that when one of us suffers, we all suffer, and that things we do benefit everyone. This is what makes us New Democrats.
New Democrats know this in the marrow of their bones. That's why we have the courage to fight. We fight to build a country that reflects those truths and honors them, not just with words, not just because it's convenient or expedient, but because it's right, because it is who we are. That is what makes us New Democrats. What
inspired the creation of this party has meant that we've continued to fight for justice even today.
There are some who say we can't build this more equal Canada of our dreams, that we're naive, that we should just get used to precarious employment, or the huge gap between the rich, the super rich, and the rest of us, or a planet in deep trouble. That the best we can do is to tinker around the edges. But in 85 years, the naysayers have never stopped us, and they won't stop us now. Because for us, this belief in a better way and in a better Canada is not just a slogan or a sales pitch. It is the heart and soul of our movement and our party.
And I would just add this, Olivia. It's the belief that a more just Canada is possible if we have the courage to seize it. It is the belief that brought us together here this weekend. It is what binds us together across regions, languages, ethnicities, classes, genders, and sexual orientations. It is what has brought us this far, and with Jagmeet Singh as our leader, it will lead us to the first new Democratic Party government in Canada.
Woo! I believe it, we believe it, and I know you all believe it too.
And it's now time to roll up our sleeves and get it done.
Thank you, merci beaucoup. Let's do this.
Merci.
Better for all would be a Canada where literally everyone in this country, every person had all the opportunities to achieve their dreams. When I started tying my hair up in the way of our spiritual traditions, it was an overnight change. I had become very used to the idea of kids pointing and laughing at me.
C'est devenu la norme. J'allais me faire regarder de travers. Les gens se mettraient à rire de moi ou à sourire, ou bien ils se tiendraient ensemble et chuchoteraient dans mon dos.
But one moment where it really stuck out was I was at the mall and I was hanging out, and somehow it caught my eye that a kid was pointing over and laughing. And then I remember that kid then pulled on the sleeves of their parent, and both their parents looked over and started laughing.
Lorsque les deux parents ont ri, je me suis vraiment senti comme si je n'avais pas de place dans notre société, comme si je n'étais pas le bienvenu.
At the time where I didn't feel confident, my mom always said to me, she just repeated this idea, this concept that we're all one, that we're all connected. And I really struggled understanding it. It was at odds with what I was experiencing, but something in it really made sense to me. I liked it.
L'idée que nous sommes tous unis m'a donné de l'espoir. L'espoir qu'un jour, ce serait possible, que je ne me sente pas comme l'autre, que je sente une vraie connexion avec les gens qui se moquaient de moi. Je suis également quelqu'un d'assez tenace, et cette ténacité m'a motivé à continuer de démontrer aux gens qui doutaient de ma valeur que oui, j'avais bel et bien de la valeur.
Doing well in life was something that I worked hard at so that I could prove that I belong. I realized that it wasn't enough to just do well.
Il y avait toujours une perception négative que je devais surmonter. Alors, je devais trouver des moyens de réduire cette tension.
The way I carried myself, the way I spoke, the way I dressed, were all ways to break through those barriers so that I could actually connect with someone.
Lorsque quelqu'un vient me dire « Hey, j'aime la couleur de ton turban », nous avons instantanément un point de départ pour jaser d'autres choses qui nous unissent.
In my 20s, my father fell really ill. As a result, my mom had to take care of him. And our whole family dynamic became really, really unstable. And it was a really difficult time. My dad basically stopped working. And then all of a sudden, there was no one kind of earning income. And so we had to do some serious planning as a family about how we could move forward. And so it hit me all of a sudden that it was going to be on me, that I had to step up. It was going to be my responsibility.
Les décisions que je prends n'auront pas juste un impact sur moi. Si les choses tournent mal, elles tourneront mal pour toute ma famille. C'était une réalité qui me faisait peur.
In that scenario, not knowing if my father was going to get better, knowing I was the oldest sibling, and I wanted to be in a position to start supporting the family, and I knew that I had to, I started looking at different options.
Je réfléchis souvent à ça. Ma vie aurait pu être tellement différente. À l'époque, les droits de scolarité à l'université où j'ai poursuivi mes études en droit étaient de $8,000. J'avais un peu d'argent mis de côté et j'ai pu obtenir un prêt pour combler le reste.
But today, going to that same school, tuition fees are over $30,000 a year. I can tell you without any exaggeration, if tuition fees are what they were today, back when I was making that decision, I wouldn't have gone. I couldn't have gone. It was not even an option.
Et ça signifie que tellement d'autres réalisations qui ont donné forme à ma vie n'auraient jamais eu lieu. J'entendais souvent le message que ma mère m'a pris dans ma tête. Et ça me rappelait que lorsque j'affronte des défis, il y a beaucoup de gens qui m'entourent qui éprouvent des difficultés du même genre, sinon encore pire.
And so I can only imagine how so many young people with so much potential, so much passion, so much that they're willing to give and wanting to give back to society are not able to realize their dreams.
Non pas parce qu'ils ne veulent pas, mais à cause des obstacles qui les empêchent de réaliser leurs rêves. Ça m'a vraiment sensibilisé aux difficultés éprouvées par les gens autour de moi.
And it also made me feel this sense of responsibility that it wasn't enough to just take care of myself. It wasn't enough to just take care of my family, but I felt this responsibility, this desire to want to take care of everyone around me.
Parce que si nous sommes tous unis et que ces gens font face aux mêmes obstacles que moi, si nous pouvons les aider à les surmonter, nous en bénéficierons tous.
As beautiful as our country is, and as amazing as a place it is to live in, there there's still too many people that feel like they're stuck, and more importantly, they feel like they don't belong. They feel like they're not being valued. And I feel like we can do better.
Je sais que nous pouvons bâtir un Canada où tout le monde s'y retrouve, où le travail de tout le monde est reconnu, où, peu importe la couleur de votre peau ou votre identité, vous ne faites pas face à la discrimination. Je crois sincèrement que nous pouvons bâtir un monde où les grandes compagnies n'exploitent pas les gens et où les gouvernements protègent vraiment leurs citoyens.
What would our world look like where everyone was celebrated, where everyone belonged? How much better would life be? How much better would our society be? That world is possible, and I want to build it together.
Néo-démocrate, c'est maintenant le moment du discours que vous attendez toutes et tous.
The leader of Canada's new Democratic Party and the next Prime Minister of Canada, Jagmeet Singh!
Wow, thank you very much. Whew, feels good. Thank you for all that love. Thank you for being here. C'est vraiment un très grand honneur d'être ici
It's
parmi
really
vous.
a great honor to be here with
C'est
you
beau
all.
de vous voir. C'est un grand honneur. This is awesome. I'm so touched. Thank you.
Oh, it's so nice to
I think
see
it's important to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered here today on the traditional lands of the Algonquin Nation, the unceded territories. But I also think it's important that we acknowledge the languages spoken by the traditional people of this land. So in a phrase of greeting, Mino Ishkwa Nawakwe. Good afternoon. Mes amis, merci d'être ici.
My friends,
Merci
thank
pour
you
votre
for
temps.
being here.
Merci
Thank
pour
you
votre
for
engagement.
your time, for your
Et merci
commitment.
pour votre
And
énergie.
thank you for your energy.
I know we're in the middle of winter, in the heart of February, and I know folks probably would have imagined being on vacation somewhere rather than being at a convention. Actually, wait a second. We're New Democrats. We'd probably rather be at a convention than a vacation any day. But in all seriousness, I really want to thank you all for being here with me, for being here with all of us together. In fact, you've all done something really incredible. We've all done something really incredible. If you look around you, you'll see a lot of people here. Well, you'd be right to see a lot of people because this is the biggest, most diverse, and youngest policy convention in the history of our party. Pretty incredible. We've been a part of some history. It's awesome. I also want to wish folks who are celebrating the Lunar New Year a happy Lunar New Year. Gong Hai Fa Choi, Gong Si Gong Si. I know it's a time to celebrate with family, those who come before, and the importance of staying together. It's also Black History Month. Yes, an incredible opportunity for us to acknowledge that we cannot talk about Canadian history without talking about Black history, and that's fundamentally important. Absolutely. So, as leader, I've had the chance to travel across this vast and beautiful country. And I've got to meet a lot of amazing people. But more important than just meeting people, I've got to hear their stories and listen to their concerns. And I've got a sense that more and more Canadians, more and more families are feeling a bit uncertain about the future. They're feeling worried. They're feeling unstable about where things are going. And people are being told on one side that the economy is booming. that things are going well, that things are chugging along, things are great. But then people aren't really feeling that in their own lives. People start to worry or start to think, if the economy is going so well and it's working, who is it working for? Because it doesn't feel like it's working for me. Well, they'd be right to think that. The gap between the rich and the rest of us is only getting wider. And those at the top don't know what it's like for the rest of Canadians. In fact, last year, 82% of the wealth generated, 82% went to the top 1%, the wealthiest people in this world. That means what people were feeling is absolutely correct. That means most of the wealth that was generated, most of the economic growth didn't go to everyday people. I'm reminded of the time my father fell ill and when he was unable to work and times were tough. And I remember that feeling in our family. We were worried. We were worried about what tomorrow would bring. We were worried about the future, and if I'm honest, I was afraid. And I know no one wants that kind of uncertainty for themselves, for their kids, certainly not for their grandkids. Personne ne veut être dans l'insécurité de vivre d'un chèque de paye à l'autre. Mais trop de gens font face à ce sentiment. Un sondage Ipsos rapportait que plus de la moitié de la population canadienne est à $200 ou moins de ne pas pouvoir payer ses factures à fin du mois. Imaginez la moitié du gens du Canada. Et les choses ne vont pas en s'améliorant. Au contraire, les écarts de revenus et les manques d'opportunités ne cessent d'augmenter. On avance à reculons. Now, some leaders seize on that insecurity and use that to drive a wedge between people who should be allies. Some leaders use our fears to benefit themselves and the powerful and the wealthy, and their friends, instead of real people. They want you to think that the only way you get ahead is if you go it alone, that working together holds us back rather than lifts us up. They want you to believe that the government is the enemy and the cause of your problems, and that taxes just take something away from you, rather than giving something back to all of us. They don't want you to believe that government belongs to all of us and together we can solve our problems. Because that allows them to continue to rig the system so that it works better for the wealthy and the powerful and their friends, better than it works for the rest of us. As a kid, I'll tell you a lot of stories about my mom, but as a kid, my mom told me that we're all connected, that there's this thread that binds us together, that when one of us is suffering, she taught me that all of us are suffering, and that if we lift up the people around us, we all rise. That affected the choices I made as a kid, as a lawyer, and as a leader. It drives me every day, this belief. Mom, I don't know where you are in the crowd somewhere here. You're gonna love to hear this, but I think many Canadians agree with you. She's pretty cute. She's right over here somewhere. Nous sommes tous reliés. Tout ce que nous faisons comme individus affecte l'ensemble du monde. C'est ce que nous voulons montrer aux gens, que c'est possible de faire de meilleurs choix pour obtenir de meilleurs résultats. Que nous pouvons réduire les inégalités au lieu de les laisser s'empirer. Que nous pouvons aider les gens à obtenir plus facilement les services qu'ils ont besoin, au lieu de faire en sorte que ce soit plus difficile d'y essayer.
Making it more difficult. And we can stop this wealth concentration between so few hands instead of making sure we have an economy that works for everybody. We want an economy that everyone could enjoy, not only a few of us.
We want to show people they deserve more than just empty words with no follow-through. Like with climate change and the environment, people know that this is a massive issue of our generation, that we need to do something about it now, that promises to reduce emissions betray the trust that we have, that we want to do something about making it better. And when this government talks about reducing emissions and doesn't, it lets people down who want to see better. And when it comes to electoral reform, people want to see a system that gives power to the people. They don't want to. And when a government betrays that trust, when a government betrays the trust of the people who want to see an electoral system that truly puts people first, that truly reflects the desires and the will of the people, that lets down people. And that's why we will not let that happen. We will commit to implementing proportional representation to give people the power they deserve, to ensure that people have a voice in our country, to make sure their government reflects them. My friends, the time for timid is over. Too many people have waited for too long. They are counting on us, and we must not let them down. We need to win. We need to have the courage to get the job done. Now, there's so many areas that I'm sure we can all think about. If we had the courage, if our government had the courage to do what was right, we could make people's lives better. I want to touch on a couple of those areas. Les gens devraient pouvoir gagner leur vie,
People should be able to earn a living,
être capable de soutenir leur famille et prendre une retraite dans la dignité.
And retire in dignity.
La réalité,
The
c'est que trop
reality
souvent le travail
is
est
that too
précaire,
often their
surtout
work
pour les
is very
jeunes.
precarious, especially
Les
for the
bas
youth.
salaires, les emplois
Low
précaires,
salaries,
le peu
precarious
avantages sociaux,
employment,
ce
low
sentiment
benefits,
d'être
this
constamment
feeling
presque.
of being constantly
Regardez
at
ce qui
risk.
est arrivé
Just
aux
look at what
emplois et
happened
retraités du
to
CERS.
the employees
Nous avons
and
une énorme
retirees of
entreprise
Sears.
qui a fait faillite.
We have a huge
Mais
business
au
here
lieu de
that went
payer
bankrupt.
celles et ceux
But
qui ont
instead of
donné
paying
toute
those
leur vie
who
pour
dedicated
cette
their
compagnie
lives
pendant
for
des
this company
décennies,
during
au lieu de payer leur
decades,
salaire,
instead of
leurs
paying their
prestations de soins de
salaries,
santé
their health
et leur
benefits,
pension de retraite.
and their
Sears a
pension,
d'abord donné des bonus
Sears
aux membres
first
de la direction.
handed bonuses to management people.
Think about that, though. Big financiers, banks, get their loans paid back. Sears executives get their bonuses while workers lose the pensions they've worked for their entire lives. And what's the Prime Minister's answer? Get used to it. We're not going to get used to it. We're going to change the laws to make sure working people's pensions are put first, are protected, so their salaries, their benefits, their wages are protected. Thanks. I'm going to keep going. I got much more to go. To tackle inequality, to really get at inequality, we need to tackle a rigged tax system that benefits the ultra-rich, and we need to make sure that corporations and the wealthiest contribute their fair share. That's what we need to do. Taxes are investments into building a fair society for us all. Un exemple d'inégalité, c'est quand les géants du web sont exemptés de payer des impôts ici, pendant que nos compagnies canadiennes n'ont pas ces avantages fiscaux. Pourquoi? Pensons à l'entente secrète avec Netflix. Trouvez-vous normal de donner à une entreprise américaine la responsabilité du développement culturel canadien?
Of developing Canadian cultural content?
Aucune garantie de contenu
the agreement
francophone
with Netflix doesn't include any guarantee on francophone content or Aboriginal content. It never says that our actors or companies will be protected. The industry was clear. We had to have an equal
le gouvernement a choisi de faire tout le contraire avec des règles privilégiées pour les entreprises étrangères et d'autres règles pour les entreprises
that are benefiting foreign businesses
and
other rules for local or Canadian businesses.
In case you haven't noticed, we live in a vast and massive country. In a country as big as ours, we depend on good infrastructure. It's something that connects us. It brings us together. It's how we move around. How we build, use, and have access to that infrastructure can either help or hurt equality in our country and for people. Like I said, we need to be connected. Our infrastructure connects us. We need to use the roads and bridges, our airports, our public transit to stay connected, to move around. If we can't use it, if we can't afford it, if it doesn't work, we lose our connections. So when we talk about building infrastructure, we must put as a priority quality and access for people first, not profits. Privatization means that we lose control, that infrastructure doesn't work for people. This also applies to technology. Remember when, how many people here remember when we used to call the internet the information highway? Folks remember that? I'm totally aging myself here, totally dating myself. Young kids are gonna be like, he's no longer cool. I think I am, but anyways, I do remember, it was called the information highway. But it's true, it's a way that we connect not only with our neighbors, not only with our friends and our communities, but it's how we connect with the world. So I believe we should look at internet connectivity as a public infrastructure. We should look at it. Absolutely. We need to build it for rural communities. We need to build it across our country, make it accessible, make it affordable, and make it high quality. Thank you. That is pretty cool. You can tell I love public infrastructure. I really believe in it. I'm glad that you gave a standing ovation for something as important as that. I believe in it. Thank you. It's critical for people to realize that we need to keep our infrastructure in public hands. That's the only way to make sure that it works for us people. We own it. It's ours. We can't sell it off or we'll never get it back. That's why we must defend it, invest in it, build it. Let's keep it public for the people. It's ours. That's right. Thank you, my friends. As Canadians, we also need to renew our commitment to complete the promise of truly universal health care. And I want to make an argument here. It's essential. Universal health care is essential when we talk about equality for all Canadians. And I'm reminded of that. I was reminded of that when I had a chance to speak with Bernie Sanders last fall. Now, definitely. I love that people are just jumping up and they want to get up on everything. I appreciate that. No, he's great. So we were chatting about public health care, and of course, you know, he's fighting for universal health care in the United States. And in fact, his plan goes further than our plan. And he reminded me, you know, the spirit of why we fought for health care in the first place, why Tommy Douglas had this dream, why we believe so much in universal health care. For us, universal health care is a tool to tackle inequality. In Canada, it used to happen, it still happens in the States, but people would get ill and they couldn't work because they were ill. They couldn't afford their medication, they couldn't afford their bills, they couldn't afford to get better. So people would get further into debt and often go into bankruptcy. So it exacerbated inequality, it made inequality worse. So people were losing not only their health, but then all their resources. So when we look at the erosion of public health care, what that means is the rise of privatized healthcare. And that means the rich get the very best of care and the rest of us get what's left. It's an attack on equality. And already across our country, we're seeing a patchwork of coverage that puts people at risk. And that's why we need to recommit to using and looking at social universal health care as a tool to combat inequality. We need to have a champion for better public health care. We need to commit to not just defending it, we need to expand it. We need to commit today to implementing universal pharmacare in our country so that seniors get the medication they need. So parents can assure their kids are healthy. So no one is forced to choose between medicine and food. And on universal healthcare or universal pharmacare, I gotta go to shout out to Andrea, who's leading the charge provincially. The way Tommy did it in Saskatchewan, Andrea's gonna do it for us here in Ontario. But I also wonder, and I want you to wonder with me, why is it that only some parts of our body are covered by our healthcare system while other parts aren't? Right? Isn't it kind of odd? I ask you to ask any health professional you know, and I'm sure they'll tell you that people live longer, healthier, better lives when they have good teeth. So why aren't we looking beyond expanding to pharmacare and look to including dental care as a part of our universal healthcare system? And then further on to eye care. Together with true universal healthcare, we are all healthier, we are all stronger, and a more vibrant society, my friends. Thank you. I kind of heard Jagmeet Singh and NDP blending together, and I love that. That sounds awesome. That's the win right there. It's also time for us to demand better solutions and more solutions to the affordable housing crisis in our country. If you think about it, probably one of the most important things that you can say in your life is having a place that you can call home. That's such an important part of your life. And everywhere I go, it's not limited to certain regions, everywhere I go, people are talking about housing not being affordable. I remember being in my kind of home province of Newfoundland and Labrador. Shout outs to Newfoundland and Labrador. Anyone here? Yeah? All right. We got a small and mighty contingency. I was at Memorial University of Newfoundland, known as MUN, if you're in the know. And I was speaking with some students, and they shared with me their concerns. And they weren't just talking about concerns about buying a home when they got older. They were worried about even finding a place to rent. It's truly a national crisis across our country in every region. People are worried about housing. Now, the government says we acknowledge that it's a national crisis. But I ask you, ask yourself this question. When they wait 2 years to do anything, do they really believe it's a crisis? How many times in your life have you had a crisis? You're like, I got this crisis. I'm gonna wait 2 years to do something about it, but it's a serious crisis. I'm pretty sure it was either not a crisis or you did not wait 2 years. Nous devons investir dans les logements sociaux, dans les coopératives.
We must invest in social housing, in co-ops. We must build affordable housing
attention particulière à la
with a special
construction d'unités
attention
locatives.
to building rental units.
Et nous devons enrayer la spéculation qui fait exploser les prix d'habitation au Canada.
That is pushing the prices up in Canada.
Dans les communautés autochtones,
in
nous devons
Aboriginal
construire
communities,
des habitations qui respectent et qui sont adaptées à leur
units
culture.
that respect everybody's culture.
Nous devons laisser aux communautés autochtones plus de contrôle.
Give more control to the Aboriginal communities because they know better than us what they need.
Quand on parle de crise du logement, de lutte à l'itinérance, trop de gens sont mis de côté. Trop de gens attendent.
Too many
on
people
doit faire
are left
plus.
behind. Too many
on doit
people
le faire
are left
maintenant
waiting.
et on
We
va
must
faire
do
le
more.
maintenant.
We will do more now.
When people look at the problems they face in their lives, they look at those problems and then they look at what the government has done, or in most cases has not done, it's hard not to get cynical. Many people start to think that maybe the government itself is the problem. I get that. I used to think that for a long time. I didn't think that government could, would, or even cared to do anything that was right for people. I remember working with organizations and we were pushing from the outside. I was pushing and demanding that the government do more to end poverty, to stand up for those who needed support, those most vulnerable in our society, refugees and immigrants, to end racism, to help people instead of hurting them. Then the people that I work with, they convinced me that we needed a partner in government to make choices that would actually benefit people. If I'm honest, I was still pretty skeptical though. I didn't see it. I didn't see how we could do it. But I was inspired by a couple of folks. I was inspired by Jack Layton and his belief in people and that government could be a source of good for people's lives. What I learned from Jack and then other examples that were kind of pointed out to me was that we could make a difference. In fact, if you think about it, it's our government. It's our resources. It's not only possible to get the changes we want, it's what government must do. It's what government should be doing. Don't let them tell you it can't be done. Je sais que les choses peuvent être difficiles.
I know that things can be tough.
Pour les familles.
For people, for
Je
families.
Je sais
I
que
know
ça
that
peut
it
être
may be
difficile de se
difficult
battre
to
pour faire face aux
struggle
problèmes devant nous. Se
when
battre
we're
pour
faced with some
changer les
problems,
choses,
some
pour
issues.
améliorer les choses.
That is to
Beaucoup
fight
d'entre
to
nous
improve
peuvent être
things.
découragés parfois.
Many of us can be
Frustrés parce que
discouraged,
c'est difficile
frustrated
de
because
voir arriver
it's
les changements qu'on souhaite.
difficult to predict
Mais je pense
or see any changes.
qu'en nous appuyant sur les liens
But
entre nous tous,
I think that by
sur
focusing
l'amour que nous avons pour
on
notre planète
the
et la
relationships
nature
that
qui
we
nous
have,
entoure, nous allons
and
ensemble
also our
prélever
love
les
for the
défis.
planet and nature, I think we can face this challenge together.
So another story about my mom. I like telling stories about my mom. She's pretty awesome. So she taught me this idea of chardi kala. It's a phrase and it means rising spirits. So if you ask her how she's doing, she'd say chardi kala. So one day she asked me, she's like, Jagmeet, how are you doing? And I said, oh, chardi kala. And then she said, why? I'm like, oh, it's like a test. And I'm like, because it's nice outside, it's a good day, I'm happy, I'm excited, things are going well. And she looked at me like moms do. That's not chardi kala. I'm like, oh, why not? Like, what is it? It's like, chardi kala is a courageous sense of optimism when things aren't going right, in the face of difficulty, in the face of hard times, and when you're losing hope, it's keeping that spirit alive. That's chardi kala. Like, whoa, Mom, that's pretty deep. That's pretty awesome. And then I thought, there's something really new democratic about that, right? About that idea of tapping into courageous spirits when times are tough. It's kind of like what we need to do all the time. Because times are pretty tough, right? But really, if you think about it, that's a spirit that we need to take on some of the biggest challenges of inequality that we're faced with. And one of those massive areas of inequality is the inequality faced by Indigenous peoples. The inequality and the injustice. And I know there's so many areas of inequality and so many areas of injustice. I just want to touch on just recently, I know many of us, a lot of us, maybe all of us in this room were rattled and shaken by the Colten Boushie case just recently in Saskatchewan. It shook a lot of us, a young Indigenous man that was killed. And I had the chance to meet with the family. And sitting down with Colten Boushie's mom, his uncle, and his sister, I was really touched by the way they described how they felt. I remember listening to Jade, Colten's sister, describing the frustration and the unfairness and the inequality and just how horrible it was that Colten's mom, when it was informed about the death of her son, she was treated like a criminal by the police. And the way they came into her home and surrounded it and made her feel like she had done something wrong. And I remember the strength that Jade showed, that she was sharing this sad moment and she was torn by the sadness, but also she was indignant and powerful in that moment. And I was inspired by her. And I remember listening to Colten's uncle and how he said, you know, I had hope. I had a feeling of hope that maybe we could see some justice. And that at the end of the case, he felt like he was knifed in the back and betrayed. And the family talked about how the message of Indigenous lives being disposable was a message that continued to be perpetuated in society. And this was another example. But I was inspired by their courage. They wanted to fight not just for justice for Colten, but justice for all Indigenous youth. They wanted to tackle the systemic discrimination that exists in our society. I was inspired by them. It's that same feeling, though, of the disposable nature of Indigenous lives that makes the missing and murdered Indigenous Women's and Girls March that happened this week so important, as a way to denounce and reject that notion and to celebrate the sanctity, the sacred value of lives. Inequality is something that grips our country in many ways. It impacts women in our society, continues to impact women. With pay equity, it's a shame that in our country, women still receive only 70 to 80% of the salary for the exact same job as a man. It's unacceptable. But inequality as it impacts women is broader than that. It impacts society in a wider way. It's appalling to me, I can't even sometimes fathom it, that the majority of women in Canada have faced some form of discrimination in their lives. And that's what makes the Me Too movement so powerful. It's an opportunity for us to grow, for us to build a better society where women are safe in every aspect of life. But it's an opportunity for us to look inwards and to grow as well. For me, it's given me an opportunity to look at the limitations of addressing something through a strict legal analysis. That it's not enough to look at this problem through a legal lens if we want to change the status quo, if we want to make this society better and a better place. That's something I'm committed to doing, and I think we need to do that together. It's going to be tough, though, but good things are tough, and change is difficult, and growth is difficult, but it's something we must do. One of the other things that we see a connection between inequality is discrimination, racism. It exacerbates existing inequality. And I know that feeling of not belonging because of the way you look. I know how that makes you feel, to feel like you don't belong. But it also has impacts on inequality. And one of those most pernicious forms of racism is anti-Black racism. It's real, it must be named, and it has devastating consequences on our society. It impacts educational outcomes, it impacts the justice system, it impacts access to resources and access to power. So we must denounce it and we must work against it. In fact, all these forms of discrimination, whether it's racism, specifically anti-Black racism, anti-Semitism, hate is like a fire. Once allowed to grow, it spreads, consuming all. And that's why we must stop it in its tracks. Together, we must stand united to denounce hate and to stand up for love, to build a society where we celebrate everyone's identity, where we stand up for all together. That's the world we want to build. Que ce soit l'attentat à la Grande Mosquée de Québec, l'islamophobie ou le populisme haineux, nous avons la responsabilité de confronter l'intolérance et la discrimination partout, tout le temps.
Everywhere, at all times.
La dignité rassemble toutes les religions, toutes les couleurs et tous les genres, peu importe qui vous aimez ou qui vous êtes.
Whoever you love or whoever you are.
Just gonna get some water real quick here. Is that awkward? One sec here. You know things are going good when someone cheers you for getting water. Equality means really building that world where everyone feels like they belong, and that's something we need to do together, my friends. And we're going to keep on going. Keep on going. It's good right there. That was good right there. Some folks know what I'm doing right now. It's a little bit awkward. Canadians believe that all good things come, that we can build good things when we work together. People need their government to have the courage to tackle the problems rather than saying that it can't be done. We can't tackle inequality without naming the problems. We can't hide from the truth, and we can't claim that things are good enough. My friends, this is not as good as it gets. Governments belong to us, and it should be making choices that build an economy that works better for all of us. Saying get used to it is not good enough for Canadians. We won't just get used to it. We won't be afraid. We won't be silent. On mérite tellement mieux que les mêmes vieux cassettes qu'on a écoutées trop souvent. Ensemble, on peut faire tellement mieux, mes amis. It takes an act of love to realize we are all in this together, my friends. And it takes an act of courage to demand better, to dream bigger, and build that better world we know is possible together. It's up to us, my friends. So speak up. Talk to your families, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. Show them that a better way is possible. Let's care more about each other. Let's demand better for Canadians. Let's be champions for people. Let's do this. Let's get it done, my friends. Thank you.